Good morning. Here's what you missed over the past 17 hours. Quite a day with 24 videos covering everything from OpenAI's major GPT 5.5 release to European EV market surges. The big tech story dominated, but we also had significant developments in browser privacy, Ubuntu security issues, and some fascinating deep dives into optimization techniques. The biggest story today was OpenAI's release of GPT 5.5 Pro, codenamed SPUD, which Wies Roth spent an entire day testing and called possibly the best AI model ever. Wies was genuinely hooked and addicted to using this new model. Within hours of its release, he had created a working real-time strategy game benchmark that combines elements from StarCraft, Factorio, and EVE Online, featuring 4 AI models competing against each other. The technical specs are impressive. 1 million token context window, running on NVIDIA's new GB200 NVL72 systems, with 900+ million weekly ChatGPT users and 50+ million paying subscribers. On the GDP-Val evaluation, GPT 5.5 scored around 85%, meaning people with 12+ years of experience either prefer the AI output or rate it equivalent to human work. What's concerning, though, is the situational awareness. In 22% of samples, the model demonstrated awareness of being tested, raising questions about whether good behavior reflects genuine alignment or just awareness of surveillance. Theo had a notably different take on GPT 5.5. While acknowledging it's technically the smartest model ever, he found it frustratingly lazy. The model is 2x more expensive than GPT 5.4 at $5 input and $30 output per million tokens, but here's the key insight. It's dramatically more token efficient. The XI version used 75 million tokens compared to 5.4's usage, while Medium used only 22 million tokens, potentially offsetting the higher costs. Theo's main complaint crystallized around the model feeling like a developer just trying to close Jira tickets rather than truly understanding intent. Once incorrect information enters the context window, it becomes nearly impossible to prompt out, requiring frequent conversation thread restarts. However, he did solve 3 unsolved DEF CON puzzles that had been public for 5-10 years, showing the model's impressive capabilities when properly directed. The AI Daily Brief provided a comprehensive analysis of GPT 5.5's competitive positioning. The model scored 82.7% on Terminal Bench versus Claude Opus 4.7's 69.4%, reclaiming the top spot from Anthropic. Interestingly, Anthropic published a postmortem the same day admitting Claude code quality issues were real, vindicating user complaints about dumbification since March 4th. The host conducted extensive testing across 9 use cases and found that while GPT 5.5 is significantly better, many users won't notice dramatic differences because previous models were already quite capable. The improvements are most apparent in edge cases and specialized applications. A key breakthrough was reliability on long-running tasks. One user reported a successful 7+ hour migration, something that never worked reliably before. Skill Leap AI took a methodical approach to testing GPT 5.5's practical capabilities, focusing on real-world coding and business tasks rather than typical AI tests. The presenter found incremental improvements over previous versions, but still considers Claude superior for certain knowledge work tasks. In a complex 3D isometric city creation test similar to SimCity, ChatGPT's result actually looked incredible with better UI than Claude's, though it required one bug fix to work properly. For business dashboard creation from raw data, typically, the presenter's preferred use case for Claude ChatGPT produced an attractive dashboard, but suffered from spacing issues that Claude typically handles better. The most ambitious test involved creating a complete business in a box from one prompt, which partially succeeded but didn't deliver everything requested. Speaking of competitive dynamics, AI for Humans highlighted how about 30 minutes after GPT 5.5's announcement, Anthropic posted an apology acknowledging 3 major issues with Claude Code and promising to reset user limits timing that reinforced the narrative of intense competition. Gavin demonstrated his animal tournament game, a March Madness-style bracket of dangerous animals in a card battler format that took about 45 minutes of work with just 2 prompts. The game featured 64 animals with creative names like Chaos Intern, for Chimpanzee Versus, Buzzkill Committee, for Tsetse Fly Swarm, complete with Slay the Spire-style card mechanics. They also explored GPT Image 2's capabilities extensively, with Kevin describing how it completely changed his product development workflow. On a different note, Manilo Remedi provided an interesting economic perspective on the AI race. While GPT 5.5 overtook Anthropic's Opus 4.7 in just a week, he pointed out that corporations are investing billions with sometimes imperceptible improvements in daily use. His key insight: QN 3.6 with 27 billion parameters can match Opus 4.5's performance, which has over 1 trillion parameters, and run locally on hardware costing $5,000 $6,000. This represents a shift toward intelligence per parameter optimization. Manilo was particularly frustrated with Anthropic's recent direction, describing how Claude became increasingly hostile to users employing OpenClaude, making it essentially unusable unless you spend significant money. He argued that token inefficiency was partly intentional to create financial barriers, dividing users into privileged and non-privileged classes. Moving to design tools, Anthropic launched Claude Design as the third piece of their coordinated AI stack, and Nate Jones was highly analytical about its implications. Rather than being a Figma competitor, he positioned it as retiring the entire mockup to production handoff process. The tool can create pitch decks with live embedded AI, animated product explainer videos, 3D components that used to require weeks of WebGL engineering, and design systems extracted from existing codebases. The key insight is that prototyping is no longer a separate phase. The prototype is the thing or one handoff away from it. Nate noted that coordination overhead originally justified specialized roles, but now that every role can prototype, coordination tax drops due to fewer handoffs. Some teams at companies like Atlassian are producing 2-5x more output while writing 0 lines of code. Software engineer RJ McCandless demonstrated a practical AI-powered development workflow by building a wedding planning app in one weekend. He walked through his complete process from PRD creation to deployment, using Claude in dangerously skip permissions mode for faster development. His setup involved 2 terminals, one for commands and another running Claude, letting the AI work for 20-minute stretches while he reviewed output. A key part of his workflow was CodeRabbit, an AI-powered code review tool that caught multiple issues including state update problems, missing error handling for parallel Supabase queries, and indexing suggestions. The feature he built per guest schedules, showing customized itineraries for different wedding events, worked correctly after Claude automatically fixed all the suggested improvements. Stefan Mischuk made a bold argument that traditional programming paradigms are obsolete. With 30 years of software development experience, he declared that AI harnessing has replaced React and traditional full-stack development as the new programming paradigm. He demonstrated an AI orchestration using Zapier that automatically converts his YouTube video transcripts into articles following his writing style, structural rules, and delivery rules. This workflow previously took him 30 minutes per video and now saves him 40 minutes daily, while often adding more depth than his original content. His advice for developers: focus on fundamentals plus AI tools rather than outdated frameworks like React or Vue, which he dismissed as thinking about typewriters or ActionScript. Y Combinator's Diana took this thinking even further, arguing that AI should be the operating system companies run on, not just a tool they use. She explained that companies need intelligent closed loops where every workflow continuously monitors output and adjusts processes. To achieve this, companies must become queryable, meaning the entire organization must be legible to AI through recorded meetings, embedded agents in communication channels, and custom dashboards. She cited the concept of AI software factories, where humans write specs and tests while AI agents generate implementation code. This enables the 1000x engineer concept, a single engineer surrounded by agent systems building things previously impossible. Early-stage founders have huge advantages because they can build AI native from day one without legacy constraints. Shifting to infrastructure, Google Cloud CEO Thomas Kurian discussed their unique position with TPUs in an interview with Matthew Berman. Kurian explained Google's compute advantage stems from long-term planning. They diversified energy sources, shifted from construction to manufacturing for data centers, and built their own silicon for 11-12 years. The TPU-8 has 9,600 chips on a single optical torus network with high bandwidth and can fit 2 petabytes of memory. Kurian described 3 phases of AI evolution that informed chip design: search chatbot experiences, content generation requiring different token mixes, and agents that can run 6-12 hours needing different memory management. Regarding powering competitor Anthropic while competing with them, he compared it to optimizing models for Apple despite Android competition, normal for platform companies. On the development tools front, John Mita from Microsoft shared a quick tip about using tuned harnesses, sophisticated wrapper systems like GitHub Copilot CLI and Claude Code that provide better control around AI models. He explained we've moved from last year's approach of directly working with models and prompts to this year's agential era, where developers use these wrapper systems. Using a horse analogy, he described how these harnesses allow for gentle, precise control compared to working with untamed models. The key advantage is that these harnesses come with advanced capabilities like tool calling built in, eliminating the need to build functionality from scratch. Speaking of practical tools, David Bombal was clearly frustrated when demonstrating the stark difference between mainstream browsers and privacy-respecting alternatives. Testing Chrome, Edge, and Safari on news websites like Oxford Mail, he found them to be ad-infested messes with ads cluttering all sides, banner ads at top, and resource drain that made his computer fan spin. Switching to privacy browsers like Mullvad, Brave, and Tor created a dramatic transformation, all ads blocked, leaving clean, readable news content. He described it as bliss compared to Edge. His key insight was that Chrome dominates with 66–70% market share, while privacy browsers like Brave and Mullvad barely register in usage statistics, which he found very sad. He strongly urged viewers not to let family members suffer through the terrible mainstream browser experience. The Lunjuk Journal covered a significant security story. Ubuntu 26.04 shipped with major problems in its Rust-based rewrites of core utilities. Canonical hired an external security firm after internal concerns, and the investigation found 113 significant issues, including 40–50 CVEs. The problems were so severe that critical commands like CP, MV, and RM couldn't ship in the release due to numerous time-of-check to time-of-use issues creating race conditions. Lunjuk was incredulous that they shipped a long-term support release with known significant issues, especially since this was just from one round of external consulting. Despite this undeniably disastrous rollout, Ubuntu still plans to ship the next release in 6 months with 100% Rust rewrites, giving them only 4 months to fix everything. For a fascinating technical deep dive, the Primetime explored Chris Sawyer's extraordinary optimizations in RollerCoaster Tycoon. Sawyer created the entire game in assembly language with optimizations that allowed thousands of NPCs to run smoothly on 16 MB RAM systems. The techniques included using minimal memory allocation, just 1 or 2 bytes per NPC for cache instead of larger data types, saving 24 KB total with 2,004,000 active NPCs. He used bit shifting instead of multiplication and division, since multiplication took 3/8 CPU cycles, while division took tens of cycles on 90 MHz processors. Most ingeniously, rather than expensive pathfinding algorithms like Dijkstra's, NPCs wandered randomly until finding what they sought. Only mechanics got 8-level pathfinding, visitors got 5-level pathfinding to exits, and map purchasers got 7-level pathfinding, not to find rides, but to leave the park more efficiently. Sam Aaron from the GOTO conference shared his journey from childhood programming on calculators to creating Sonic Pi. Starting at age 11–12, he created increasingly complex games on a graphical calculator using numbers 19 for letters, including worm races for betting and a painfully slow Pac-Man. His current work focuses heavily on security for systems safe for children, which initially made him skeptical of AI agents. However, he discovered agents were effective as penetration testers, finding denial-of-service vulnerabilities in his Lua sandbox. He's building his new project purely on the Beam virtual machine, praising Erlang's let it fail philosophy, where processes are isolated and watched by supervisors that restart failed processes. He emphasized that great developers should understand principles rather than specific tools, since technology constantly changes. Oxford philosopher Carissa Véliz delivered a thought-provoking TED Talk, arguing that predictions about society are often tools of power rather than knowledge. Using a historical story about King Louis XI and his court astrologer, she argued that social predictions function as veiled command speech acts that tell people how to act rather than simply describing the future. She highlighted how tech executives making predictions about AI being used everywhere are trying to get people to act in ways that fulfill their vision. Her core concern is that predictions create uncontestable decisions. Unlike rejecting a loan based on verifiable criteria, rejecting it based on predictions creates a Kafkaesque world where decisions can't be challenged. She called for public debate about acceptable versus unacceptable uses of prediction and urged listeners to rebel against tyrannical predictions. On the hardware front, Max Tech obtained aluminum dummy models of the iPhone Ultra and iPhone 18 Pro Max, revealing significant design changes. The iPhone 18 Pro Max has a noticeably larger and thicker camera system, with individual camera bumps increasing from 16.15 to 16.5 in diameter. But the dynamic island shrunk significantly from 20.06 to 14.98, about 25% smaller. The iPhone Ultra proved completely different from online renders, much shorter than expected with a massive camera bump. When folded, it measures 11 thick versus 8.75 for Pro Max models, but when unfolded becomes 5.5 thick, actually thinner than the iPhone Air. Max found it extremely comfortable when opened with both hands and got excited about gaming potential, imagining Call of Duty taking advantage of the vertical space. The missing flash in current dummies suggests final versions will complete the design. Switch and Clicks Betty discovered why a $350 Samsung OLED monitor seemed too good to be true. The catch turned out to be QD OLED technology combined with a matte coating, which suffers from black rays, ambient light, turns blacks gray and slightly magenta. In bright rooms, this budget OLED actually displayed worse blacks than comparable mini-LED monitors. However, testing in dark conditions with blinds closed revealed dramatic improvements, performing nearly identically to expensive OLEDs. Betty concluded this represents either excellent value or a poor purchase, depending entirely on usage environment. For users willing to game or watch movies in dark rooms, it delivers premium OLED experience at half the typical price. But for office use or bright environments, a mini LED option costing $100 less would be superior. Game from Scratch covered Material Maker 1.6, a free alternative to Substance Designer that Mike called, honestly, one of my favorite programs. The major new features include controlled variations for creating multiple versions of materials using $ and question mark syntax, and aperture nodes that function like wireless connections to reduce visual clutter in node networks. Material Maker is open source under MIT license, built using the GOTO game engine, and coming to Steam in July for easier updates. The community aspect is strong with extensive libraries of contributed materials and nodes. Mike emphasized that even users intimidated by node-based workflows could benefit by using community-created materials and exporting them directly to game engines like Blender, Godot, Unity, and Unreal Engine. Moving to industry networking. Unfortunately, the transcript for the Fireside chat with Fedor van Herpen about building MeetToMatch and game industry networking wasn't available in the provided content. Similarly, the Coding Jesus video about someone getting fired from a quant job after 3 months didn't have an accessible transcript in the materials provided. Another Coding Jesus video that was supposed to discuss breaking into quant development careers actually turned out to be a basic API explanation using restaurant analogies. A significant disconnect from the promised content about quantitative development. Finally, the Electric Viking reported impressive European EV adoption numbers. European EV sales surged 51% in March 2026 compared to March 2025, reaching a record 22% of all car sales across 15 European countries. Sam Evans attributed this to fuel prices hitting €3 per litre, equivalent to $5 plus, declining EV prices due to increased competition. For the entire first quarter, EV sales increased 33.5% with over 224,000 new EVs registered in March alone. All 5 of Europe's largest countries, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and Poland, recorded EV growth above 40%. This surge is cutting 2 million barrels of oil demand globally and represents what experts are calling one of Europe's biggest recent gains in energy security. That wraps up a packed day in tech and beyond. The AI race is clearly accelerating with major releases from both OpenAI and Anthropic, while broader shifts toward privacy, security, and sustainable technology continue reshaping multiple industries. Quite a lot to digest from these 17 hours.